The ship descended through clouds that had not felt the touch of human eyes in 40,000 years. Katie pressed her face against the viewport, watching as the world of her ancestors slowly revealed itself. She had seen pictures of Earth in the facility's archives, images of blue oceans and green forests and sprawling cities filled with billions of people. She had prepared herself for ruins and devastation. What she found instead took her breath away. Earth had healed itself. The oceans were blue again, deeper and clearer than any photograph could capture. Forests covered the continents in blankets of green and gold, stretching from coast to coast without interruption. Rivers carved silver paths through valleys that had once held highways and factories. Animals roamed freely across plains where cities had stood. The only signs of humanity were the ruins, scattered across the landscape like the bones of giants. Broken towers poked up through the trees. Crumbling bridges spanned rivers that had changed their courses centuries ago. But even these remnants were being swallowed by nature, covered in vines and moss, slowly returning to the earth. "It is beautiful," Katie whispered. Sorath stood beside her, watching the world through alien eyes. "Your planet has recovered remarkably well. The radiation levels are within safe parameters. The ecosystem appears to be thriving." "We always thought we would destroy it forever," Katie said. "We thought the damage would never heal. But life finds a way, I guess. It always finds a way." They landed in a field that might have once been a park. Katie stepped out of the shuttle and felt grass beneath her feet for the first time in her life. She had been born on a space station, raised in artificial environments, trained in facilities made of metal and plastic. She had never known what it felt like to stand on solid ground under an open sky. She fell to her knees and pressed her hands into the soil. It was warm and damp, filled with the smell of growing things. Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling. "I am home," she said softly. "After everything, I am finally home." Sorath gave her time to compose herself. He understood, as much as any alien could, what this moment meant. This was not just a planet. This was the birthplace of an entire species, the cradle of a civilization that had reached for the stars and fallen short. They spent several weeks exploring. Katie walked through the ruins of cities she did not recognize, touching stones that had been shaped by human hands so long ago. She found artifacts in the rubble, fragments of the world that had been. A child's toy, corroded but still recognizable. A book, its pages long since rotted away. A ring, simple and golden, that someone had worn on their wedding day. She gathered these things carefully, treating each one as if it were sacred. And perhaps they were. Perhaps these fragments were all that remained of 8 billion lives, 8 billion stories, 8 billion dreams that ended in fire and silence. "I want to build something here," Katie told Sorath one evening as they sat beside a river that flowed through the heart of what had once been a great city. "A memorial. Something that will last. I want the galaxy to know who we were." Sorath nodded. The collective would support such an effort. There are many who wish to understand humanity better. A memorial could serve as a place of learning. And so the work began. Ships came from across the galaxy, bringing builders and artists and historians. They worked alongside Katie, learning from her about the species that had created this world. She told them about human music and art, about literature and philosophy, about the great achievements and terrible failures of her kind. The memorial grew slowly over the years. At its center stood a great hall filled with artifacts from human history. There were paintings rescued from abandoned museums, sculptures recovered from buried galleries, instruments that had not been played in millennia. Visitors came from every corner of the collective to see these treasures, to understand the species that had created them. Outside the hall, gardens grew in patterns that honored human traditions. There were rosebush and cherry trees, sunflowers and lily, all the flowers that humans had loved and cultivated. Paths wound through the gardens, leading to quiet spaces where visitors could sit and reflect. Katie became something she had never expected. Not a leader or a warrior, not a scientist or a politician. She became a teacher. Species from across the galaxy came to learn from her, to hear her stories about humanity, to understand what it had meant to be human. She taught them about love and loss, about hope and despair, about the strange mix of beauty and cruelty that had defined her species. She did not hide the ugly parts of human history. She spoke honestly about the wars and the violence, the hatred and the fear. But she also spoke about the kindness, the compassion, the moments of grace that had made humanity worth saving. "We were not perfect," she told a group of young students one day. "We never claimed to be. We made terrible mistakes. We hurt each other in ways that I still do not fully understand. But we also loved each other. We created art that made people weep with joy. We built things that reached toward the sky. We dreamed of touching the stars." She paused, looking out over the memorial gardens. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. It looked exactly like the sunsets her mother had described so many years ago on a space station that no longer existed. "I think that is what humanity was," Katie continued. "Not good or evil, not heroes or villains. Just people, trying their best, failing often, but always, always trying." The years passed. Katie grew old, her hair turning white and her steps growing slow. The collective offered her medical treatments that could extend her life for centuries, but she refused. She had lived long enough, she said. She had seen things that no human had ever dreamed of seeing. She was ready. On her final day, Katie walked through the memorial one last time. Soreth walked beside her, as he had done for decades. They did not speak. There was nothing left to say that had not already been said 1,000 times. She stopped in front of the central monument, a simple statue of a woman looking up at the stars. It was not meant to be her, specifically. It was meant to be all of humanity. Every person who had ever lived, every dream that had ever been dreamed, every hope that had ever been hoped. "Do you think we mattered?" Katie asked quietly. "In the end, after everything, do you think humanity mattered?" Soreth considered the question carefully. He thought about all the species in the collective, all the worlds, and all the histories. He thought about the wars that had been fought and the peace that had been built. He thought about the fears that had been overcome and the understanding that had been gained. "Yes," he said finally, "I think you mattered very much. You showed us that even the smallest voice can be heard across the void. You showed us that survival is not enough, that what matters is what we do with our survival. You showed us that hope is the most powerful force in the universe." Katie smiled. It was the same smile she had given him on the day they first met, tired and sad but real. "That is all I ever wanted," she said. "Just to be remembered. Just to matter, even a little." She died that night peacefully, surrounded by friends from a dozen different species. Her body was buried in the memorial gardens, in a quiet spot overlooking the river. The collective declared a day of mourning, the first time such an honor had ever been given to a member of an extinct species. Her final message was broadcast across every system in the galaxy, just as her first message had been so many years before. "We were not perfect," her recorded voice said. "We never claimed to be. But we tried. We reached out to the stars because we wanted to know we were not alone. And in the end, we were not. Thank you for answering. Thank you for remembering. Thank you for giving humanity a second chance to matter." The memorial on Earth continued to grow long after Katie was gone. It became the largest in the galaxy, a place of pilgrimage for species who wanted to understand what it meant to hope against all odds. At its center, The statue of the woman looking up at the stars stood unchanged, a reminder of the last human and the signal she had sent into the darkness. The inscription on the base was simple, written in every language the collective knew. Humanity was here. We loved, we dreamed, we reached. And for the first time in 40,000 years, Earth was no longer silent. It sang with the voices of 1,000,000 visitors, all of them honoring the species that had once called this world home. The humans were gone, but they were not forgotten. They never would be. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was the largest building ever constructed by any known species. It floated in space, far from any star, in a location chosen for its neutrality. 17 species sent their ambassadors here to discuss matters of peace and war. Today, all 17 were present. Ambassador Crix of the Nalari Collective stood at the central podium. He was a tall being with gray skin and 4 large eyes that never seemed to blink. His people were known for their calm nature and their skill with technology. When Crix spoke, others listened. "I have called this emergency session to discuss the human problem," Crix said. His voice echoed through the vast chamber. "In the past month, we have received reports from across the galaxy. All of them concern human vessels that appear and disappear without explanation." Murmurs spread through the assembly. Representatives shifted in their seats. Everyone had heard the rumors, but hearing them spoken aloud in this place made them feel more real. Krix continued. "The Karathi have lost 63 warships. The vessels simply vanished. No wreckage has been found. No weapon signatures have been detected. The Karathi have no explanation for what happened." A delegate from the Telvanni Federation raised his hand. He was a short creature covered in blue scales. "Perhaps the Karathi are lying. Perhaps they lost these ships in battle and are too proud to admit it." "That was my first thought as well," Crix said. "But we have our own reports to consider. 3 weeks ago, a human vessel appeared in Nalari space. It stayed for exactly 1 hour, then disappeared. Our sensors tracked it the entire time. It did not use hyperspace. It did not generate any energy signature associated with faster-than-light travel. It simply existed in one location, and then it existed in another." Silence fell over the chamber. The representatives looked at each other with growing unease. "How is that possible?" someone asked. "It is not possible," Crix replied. "According to everything we know about physics, what I described cannot happen." And yet it did. I saw the sensor data myself. There is no mistake. The Telvanni delegate leaned forward. "Perhaps their technology masks their drives. Perhaps they have discovered a new form of travel that we cannot detect." Crix shook his head slowly. "We considered that theory. Last week, a human ambassador visited our homeworld. She agreed to let us scan her vessel while she was there. We used every instrument we possess. We searched for exotic particles, unusual energy patterns, any sign of advanced propulsion. We found nothing. Nothing at all? Nothing. According to our sensors, her ship contained standard chemical thrusters suitable for moving within a star system. There was no device capable of traveling between stars. And yet she had come from Earth, which is 2,000 light-years away." The chamber erupted in confused conversation. Delegates argued with each other. Some insisted that the Nalari sensors must be broken. Others suggested that the humans were using some kind of illusion technology. A few simply refused to believe what they were hearing on the other side of the galaxy, on a small human colony called New Montana. A young woman named Beth Collins was trying to explain the basics to her alien exchange student. His name was Trell, and he was a Nalari who had come to learn about human culture. So far, he was very confused. They sat in Beth's workshop, surrounded by tools and half-finished machines. Beth was an engineer who specialized in starship design. She knew more about human travel technology than almost anyone. I do not understand, Charles said for the fifth time. His four eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of frustration among his people. You say your ships do not move through space, but I have seen them move. They go from one place to another. That is movement. Beth smiled patiently. She had expected this to be difficult. Okay, let me try another way. Think about space. What is it to you? Space is the void between objects. It is empty distance that must be crossed. Right, that is how most species think about it. But humans learn something different. Space is not really empty. It is not really a void. It is more like a fabric, or maybe a story. It has structure, but that structure is not fixed. Trell's eyes blinked again. I do not understand. Beth picked up a piece of paper from her desk. Look at this paper. If I want to move a dot from one corner to another corner, I could draw a line across the surface, right? That would be like your hyperspace travel. You are moving through the fabric. Yes, that makes sense. Beth folded the paper so that the two corners touched. But what if I fold the paper? Now the two corners are in the same place. The dot does not need to move at all. But you cannot fold space, Trell said. That would require enormous energy. More energy than exists in most stars. You're right, if you try to force it. But what if you do not force it? What if you just ask nicely? Trell stared at her. Ask nicely? Beth laughed. Sorry, that was a bad joke. What I mean is, space is not solid like your people think. It is more like a suggestion. And if you understand how suggestions work, you can make different suggestions. Better suggestions. This makes no sense. I know. I am sorry. It is very hard to explain with words. We learn it differently. We feel it more than we understand it. Trell sat quietly for a long moment. His four eyes focused on Beth with intense concentration. Your people frighten the council, he finally said. They do not understand what you can do. Many of them think you are dangerous. Beth's smile faded. I know, that makes us sad. We are not trying to frighten anyone. We just see the universe differently than you do. The Karathi lost many ships. Some say you destroyed them. We did not destroy them. We moved them. Moved them? Where? Beth looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere far away. Somewhere they cannot hurt anyone. The Karathi attacked first. They would have killed our people. We defended ourselves. Without weapons? We do not need weapons. Not the way you think of them. Trell was silent for a long time. Finally, he asked the question that had been forming in his mind since he arrived on New Montana. What are humans, really? Beth turned back to him with sad eyes. We are just people, Trell. We are scared and hopeful and confused, just like everyone else. We just learn to walk through the universe in a different way. That does not make us gods. It does not make us monsters. It just makes us different. But even as she spoke, Beth knew that her words would not comfort the council. They would continue to fear what they did not understand. And humans would continue to walk between the stars like ghosts, unseen and unknowable, hoping that someday the rest of the galaxy would learn to see what they saw. Until that day came, they would remain phantoms in the darkness, watching and waiting for the universe to catch up. The Karathi shipyard was the largest military facility in the Andromeda sector. It hung in orbit around a dead world, a massive structure of metal and fire where warships were born. 300 vessels floated around it at any given time. Defense platforms bristled with weapons. Sensor arrays swept the surrounding space constantly, searching for any sign of threat. No enemy had ever come within 1,000 light years of this place. It was the beating heart of the Karathi war machine, protected by layer upon layer of security. Nothing could approach it without being detected and destroyed. The stealth carrier, Silent Horizon, was currently parked inside the main docking bay. Commander Daniel Hayes sat in his captain's chair, watching the Karathi ships drift past his viewports. The enemy vessels were beautiful in a terrible way. Their hulls gleamed with polished metal. Their weapons glowed with barely contained power. Each one was designed for conquest and destruction. None of them knew the humans were there. Daniel was a calm man who rarely showed emotion. He had served in the United Earth Navy for 20 years, and he had learned that panic helped no one. But even he felt a small thrill at what they were doing. They were sitting inside the enemy's most secure facility, surrounded by enough firepower to crack a planet. And no one had any idea. His tactical officer, Maria Santos, looked up from her console. The infiltration team has reached the command center. They are downloading the database now. Good. How much time do they need? About 30 minutes for the full download. Lieutenant Cole says they have not encountered any problems. Daniel nodded. Lieutenant Cole was one of the best infiltration specialists in the fleet. If anyone could walk through a Karathi command center without being noticed, it was him. On the other side of the shipyard, Lieutenant Cole was doing exactly that. He moved through the corridors like a shadow, passing within arm's reach of Karathi soldiers who never saw him. His team of 4 followed close behind, each of them invisible to the eyes and sensors of the enemy. The Karathi command center was a large room filled with screens and controls. Officers worked at their stations, monitoring ship movements and defense systems. They spoke to each other in their harsh language, completely unaware of the humans standing among them. Cole approached the main computer terminal. A Karathi officer sat right in front of it, reviewing reports. Cole waited patiently until the officer stood up and walked away to speak with a colleague. Then Cole sat down in the vacant seat and plugged his device into the system. The download began immediately. Years of Karathi military data flowed into the small human device. Fleet deployments, weapon designs, communication codes. Everything the United Earth Navy needed to understand their enemy. One of Cole's team members, a young woman named Lisa Park, whispered through their private communication channel. "This is almost too easy." "Stay focused," Cole replied. "Easy can become hard very quickly." As if to prove his point, a Karathi officer suddenly walked directly toward Cole's position. Cole did not move. He did not breathe. The officer stopped less than a foot away, reaching for something on the console right next to Cole's hand. For a long moment, they were close enough to touch. Cole could smell the alien's strange scent. He could see the fine scales on its skin. The Karathi grabbed a data tablet and walked away without looking at the empty chair where Cole sat. Cole let out a slow breath. The download was at 50%. Back on the silent horizon, Daniel received a message from Earth. It was brief and encrypted, sent through channels that the Karathi could never detect. He read it and felt his jaw tighten. "What is it?" Maria asked, seeing his expression. "Command has confirmed the reports. The Karathi destroyed Colony Epsilon 3 days ago. Nuclear bombardment. 40,000 civilians killed." Maria closed her eyes for a moment. "Men, women, and children?" "All of them." The Karathi wanted to send a message about who controls this region of space. The bridge was silent. Every crew member had heard the news. Every crew member was thinking about the 40,000 people who had died for no reason except that they were human. Daniel looked at the Karathi flagship on his screen. It was a massive vessel, larger than anything else in the shipyard. The admiral who had ordered the attack was probably on board right now, celebrating his victory. "Tag the flagship," Daniel said quietly. "I want to be able to find it anywhere in the galaxy." "Yes, sir." In the command center, Cole received the same news through his earpiece. His hand trembled slightly as he continued the download. 80% complete. He thought about Epsilon 4. He had never been there, but he had seen pictures. It was a beautiful world with green forests and blue oceans. The colonists had built small towns and farms. They had schools and hospitals and parks where children played. They had been peaceful people who only wanted to build a new home among the stars. Now they were the download finished. Cole removed his device and stood up. His team gathered around him, waiting for orders. He looked at the Karathi officers going about their work, completely unaware that their secrets had just been stolen. Part of him wanted to do something, to show them that humans were here, to make them pay for what they had done. But that was not the mission. Not today. "We are leaving," he said. "Stay quiet and stay invisible. We have what we came for." They walked out of the command center the same way they had entered. No one saw them go. They passed through corridors and docking bays, moving between Karathi soldiers like ghosts in a graveyard. 20 minutes later, they were back on the silent horizon. Daniel met them at the airlock. "Did you get everything?" "Everything and more," Cole replied. He handed over the device. Their entire military database. Fleet positions, weapon specifications, communication codes. "We know everything they know." Daniel took the device and nodded. "Good work, Lieutenant." "Sir, I heard about Epsilon 4. We all did." Cole's eyes were hard. "What happens now?" Daniel looked out the viewport at the shipyard full of Karathi warships. 300 vessels, ready for war. The enemy thought they were safe here. They thought no one could touch them. They were wrong. "Now," Daniel said, "we go home. We share this information with command. And then we show the Karathi what it means to make enemies of ghosts." The silent horizon slipped away from the shipyard as quietly as it had arrived. No alarms sounded. No weapons fired. The Karathi continued their work, never knowing that humans had walked among them, had sat at their computers, had stolen their secrets right from under their noses. The war was about to begin, and the Karathi had no idea what was coming. The war lasted 6 weeks. Historians would later call it the strangest conflict in the history of the galaxy. It was a war fought without battles, without explosions, without any of the things that usually define war. And yet it was devastating. Admiral Vorath stood on the bridge of his flagship, trying to understand what was happening to his empire. The reports came in every hour, each one worse than the last. Supply convoys were disappearing. Fuel depots were exploding. Communication stations were going silent. And no one knew why. "Report," he demanded for the 100th time that day. His aide, a young officer named Krath, looked exhausted. "We have lost contact with 17 more ships, Admiral. The convoy carrying fusion cores to the 3rd Fleet has vanished. Governor Trell reports that his entire planetary defense grid has shut down for no apparent reason. Sabotage? We have found no evidence of intruders, Admiral. No breaches in security. No unauthorized access to our systems. The equipment simply stopped working." Vorath slammed his fist against his console. Equipment does not simply stop working. Someone is doing this. Find them. But they could not find them. That was the problem. The humans were everywhere and nowhere. They left no footprints, no evidence, no trace of their presence. They were like smoke, like shadows, like bad dreams that vanished in the morning light. The psychological effect was devastating. Karathi soldiers began seeing humans everywhere. They reported figures in the corners of their vision, whispers in empty rooms, eyes watching from the darkness. Some claimed that human agents had stood beside them for days, invisible, listening to every word they said. The High Command dismissed these reports as paranoia. But the paranoia spread. Soldiers refused to speak openly, afraid that invisible enemies were listening. Officers stopped trusting each other. wondering if their colleagues had been replaced by human imposters. The mighty Karathi war machine was eating itself from within. On Earth, the United Earth Navy Command Center was busy with activity. Screens showed the positions of every known Karathi vessel. Reports flowed in from agents scattered across enemy space. The war was being fought from this room, with keyboards and communications instead of weapons. Captain Laura Bennett coordinated the operations. She had not slept in 3 days, but she could not rest. Not while the work continued. Not while justice was being served. Team 7 has completed their mission, an officer reported. The Karathi Third Fleet has received false orders to withdraw from the Epsilon sector. Confirmed, another officer added. The Third Fleet is moving to the wrong coordinates. They will arrive at empty space in approximately 12 hours. Laura nodded. And Team 12? Team 12 has disabled the sensor grid around the Karathi homeworld. They are blind for the next 6 hours. It was beautiful in a terrible way. The humans were not destroying the Karathi military. They were turning it against itself. False orders sent fleets chasing phantoms. Disabled sensors left worlds defenseless. Leaked information turned allies against each other. The Karathi had built their empire on fear and force. Now they were learning what true fear felt like. Admiral Varath received a message from the High Council. They were asking questions he could not answer. How had the humans penetrated their security? How were they disrupting operations across the entire empire simultaneously? What weapons were they using? Varath had no answers. He only had more reports of ships vanishing, systems failing, and soldiers losing their minds to fear. His mighty fleet was crumbling, and he could not find a single enemy to fight. Then, 6 weeks after the war began, everything changed. A ship appeared at the heart of the Karathi homeworld's defense grid. It materialized without warning, without any energy signature, without any of the signs that should accompany a vessel dropping out of faster-than-light travel. It was simply there, as if it had always been there. It was a small gray ship with strange symbols on its hull. The Wanderer. Varath recognized it immediately. It was the same ship that had started everything. The ship that had somehow destroyed 12 of his warships without a trace. The ship that had haunted his nightmares for weeks. All weapons lock on that vessel. He ordered. Fire everything. But before anyone could respond, a message appeared on every screen in the Karathi homeworld. It was broadcast on all frequencies, to every ship, every station, every device capable of receiving communications. The face of a human man appeared. He had calm eyes and a quiet voice. My name is Kevin Price, the human said. I am the commander of this vessel. I have a message for the Karathi Empire. Varath stared at the screen. This was the enemy. This quiet, ordinary-looking human was responsible for all of it. We came to your space as explorers, Kevin continued. We wanted to meet new species and learn about the galaxy. We meant you no harm. But you attacked our ships. You destroyed our colony. You killed 40,000 of our people, including children who had done nothing wrong. The message was being heard across the entire empire. Every Karathi, from the highest admiral to the lowest worker, was watching. We could have destroyed your empire in return. We could have erased your ships, your worlds, your entire species from existence. We have that power. You have seen what we can do, and you know this is true. Varath felt cold. He knew the human was not bluffing. But we chose not to destroy you. We chose to show you what we could do without killing. Every ship that vanished is still intact, moved to a distant place where it can harm no one. Every soldier who went missing is still alive, returned safely to your territory after learning that we are not monsters. Kevin paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer. We come in peace. We always did. The only question is whether you want to find out what happens when we do not. We are giving you 1 hour to surrender. If you refuse, we will continue what we started. And this time, we will not be so gentle. The screen went dark. Vareth looked around his bridge. His officers stared back at him with fear in their eyes. The entire Empire was waiting for his response. The entire Empire was watching to see what he would do. He thought about fighting. He thought about ordering every ship to attack the Wanderer, to destroy it at any cost. But he remembered what had happened to the 12 ships he sent before. He remembered the 63 that vanished afterward. He remembered the convoys, the stations, the entire fleets that had disappeared without a trace. And he knew the truth. The Karathi could not win this war. They had never been able to win it. They had been defeated before the first shot was fired. Vareth closed his eyes. When he opened them again, he gave the order that ended the Karathi Empire as a conquering power. "Contact the human vessel," he said quietly. "Tell them we surrender." 47 minutes later, the war was over. 10 years had passed since the Karathi surrendered. The galaxy was a different place now. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had been rebuilt to include 18 species instead of 17. The newest member was humanity, though many delegates still were not sure what to make of them. Ambassador Patricia Lane represented Earth at the council meetings. She was a tall woman with silver hair and a warm smile that made other species feel comfortable. She spoke softly, listened carefully, and always tried to find peaceful solutions to problems. Everyone liked her. Everyone was also terrified of her. It was not Patricia's fault. She was genuinely kind and wanted nothing more than friendship between all species. But the other delegates could not forget what humanity had done. They could not forget the Karathi War, when a species of quiet explorers had brought the most powerful empire in the sector to its knees without firing a single weapon. The Telvanni delegate leaned toward his Nalari colleague during a break in the session. "Do you think there are more of them here? Humans we cannot see?" Ambassador Crix glanced around the hall nervously. "There are always more humans than we can see. That is what they do. It is unsettling. It is terrifying. But what can we do? They have never harmed us. They have never threatened us. They simply exist in ways we cannot understand." Patricia walked over to them with 2 cups of tea. "I brought refreshments. I hope I am not interrupting." Both aliens jumped slightly. They had not heard her approach. Patricia smiled apologetically. "Sorry, I did not mean to startle you." "Not at all, Ambassador," Crix said, taking the tea with trembling hands. "You are very thoughtful." Patricia sat down beside them. "I know what you were discussing. You were wondering if there are invisible humans in this hall." The Telvanni delegate looked uncomfortable. "We meant no offense. None taken. And to answer your question, yes, there probably are. We have security personnel at most galactic events. They are here to protect everyone, not just humans. But why must they be invisible?" Crix asked. "Why not let us see them?" Patricia considered the question carefully. "Because seeing changes things. When you know you are being watched, you act differently. Our people prefer to observe without changing what they observe. It is not about secrecy. It is about truth." The delegates did not look convinced, but they nodded politely. Far from the council hall, on a world called New Epsilon, Kevin Price stood before a wall of black stone. 40,000 names were carved into its surface. 40,000 people who had died when the Karathi destroyed the original colony. Kevin came here every year on the anniversary. He brought flowers and stood in silence, reading the names and remembering. Some of them had been his friends. Some had been strangers. All of them had been innocent. A small hand slipped into his. He looked down to see his daughter Sophie standing beside him. She was 8 years old now, with her mother's brown hair and her father's quiet eyes. "Papa, why do you come here every year?" "To remember," Kevin said, "and to promise that it will never happen again." Sophie looked at the wall of names. "Did the bad aliens kill all these people?" "Yes, they did. But we stopped them, right? We made them surrender." "We did." Sophie was quiet for a moment. "My teacher says the other aliens are scared of us. She says they call us ghosts because we can disappear." Kevin knelt down to look at his daughter. "What do you think about that?" "I think it is sad. I do not want people to be scared of me." Kevin smiled and touched her cheek. "That is because you are a good person, Sophie. Fear is natural when people do not understand something. But understanding takes time. Someday, the other species will know us better. They will see that we are not so different from them. Will they stop being scared then? I hope so. That is what we are working toward." Above them, invisible to any sensor in the known universe, 1,000 human ships floated in silent formation. They were there to protect New Epsilon, to make sure that what happened before could never happen again. Their crews went about their daily routines, eating and sleeping and living their ordinary lives while guarding a world full of people they would never meet. This was what humanity had become. Guardians in the shadows. Protectors who did not need to be seen. They asked for no recognition, no praise, no reward. They simply did what needed to be done. On the council station, Patricia finished her meetings and returned to her private quarters. She sat by her window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, human ships were watching. Human agents were listening. Human eyes were seeing things that no one else could see. It was a heavy responsibility. Patricia sometimes wondered if humanity had become too powerful, too invisible, too separate from the rest of the galaxy. But then she remembered the Karathi War. She remembered what happened when power went unchecked, when empires believed they could do whatever they wanted without consequences. Someone had to watch. Someone had to be ready. Someone had to make sure that the strong did not crush the weak simply because they could. Humanity had chosen to be that someone. Not because they wanted power, but because they understood what power could do. They had seen their own history, full of wars and cruelty and suffering. They knew how easy it was for civilizations to lose their way. So they watched. They waited. They protected. And they hoped that someday they would not be needed anymore. Someday, the galaxy would learn to live in peace without guardians in the shadows. Someday, humans could step out of the darkness and simply be neighbors, friends, fellow travelers on the great journey between the stars. Until that day came, they would remain phantoms. Not because they wanted to frighten anyone, but because the most terrifying thing in the universe was not the monster you could see. It was the one that chose, out of kindness and love and hope for a better future, to remain invisible. Kevin held Sophie's hand as they walked away from the memorial. The sun was setting over New Epsilon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. "It was beautiful, Papa?" Sophie asked. "Yes? Will you teach me how to be a phantom?" Kevin looked down at his daughter, at her curious eyes and hopeful smile. She was so young. She had so much to learn. But she had asked, and that was the first step. "When you are ready," he said, "I will teach you everything." They walked home together, father and daughter, two small figures against the vast canvas of the stars. Behind them, the names on the wall caught the last light of the day. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the sky, humanity continued its silent vigil, watching over a galaxy that still had so much to learn about the phantoms in their midst. The end.